Imagine a place where the shadows hold secrets, and every locked door encloses a story of profound darkness. A place where the most chilling acts committed against humanity are held captive, but their echoes still reverberate. This isn't a fictional nightmare. It's the stark reality of maximum security prisons across the globe, where individuals who shattered lives, defied human empathy, and committed unspeakable evils now reside. Today, we step behind those walls, not to glorify their deeds, but to understand the cold, hard facts of the crimes that landed them there, and the lives forever altered by their presence. These are the most dangerous evil killers in prison. Our journey into these grim realities begins with a name that became synonymous with racially motivated terror: David Adam Pate. In 2013, the quiet community of South Carolina was rocked by a brutal act of violence that exposed a sinister ideology. David Pate, a man whose skin bore the chilling marks of white supremacist tattoos, including the word Satan and gang numbers, lured 33-year-old Ricky James. What followed was a horrifying ordeal. Pate attacked James, stabbing him a staggering 39 times with a butcher knife. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of madness. It was a calculated act fueled by a deep-seated hatred. Pate's confession, combined with overwhelming DNA evidence and his bloody clothes, left no doubt about his guilt. The courts wasted no time. David Adam Pate was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. He has been incarcerated since 2013, his racial animosity forever confined within prison walls, a grim reminder of the darkness that can fester within. Moving from an act of external hatred, we confront a betrayal from within the closest of bonds. Joseph Ferrato, an anniversary trip, meant to be a celebration of love, instead became the scene of an unimaginable horror in 2021. Joseph Ferrato, during what should have been a romantic getaway, turned on his wife, Emily Ferlazzo. He shot her twice in the head, then proceeded with a monstrous act of dismemberment using a handsaw. The immediate aftermath was a desperate attempt at deception. Ferrato lied to Emily's family, trying to cover up the atrocity he had committed, even leaving her dismembered remains in a camper. But lies, especially those attempting to obscure such profound violence, rarely hold. Joseph Ferrato was apprehended and faced the full weight of justice. He was sentenced to 42.5 years in prison, now incarcerated in Vermont. The sentence means he will be eligible for release at the age of 83, a stark testament to the enduring consequences of his heinous crime. From the chilling reality of a destroyed relationship, we turn our attention to a disturbing fantasy that almost became a grim reality. Gavin Plum. In the United Kingdom, the public was left stunned by the revelation of a disturbing plot involving a well-known figure. Gavin Plum meticulously planned to kidnap and murder British TV presenter Holly Willoughby. His sinister intentions were laid bare when he shared details of a kidnap kit online, a terrifying inventory that included handcuffs and suspected chloroform. This wasn't an isolated incident for Plum. He possessed a long and troubling history of fantasy-based crimes, with past convictions for attempted kidnappings already on his record. His escalating obsession painted a disturbing picture of a mind detached from reality and intent on inflicting harm. The authorities intervened before his dark fantasies could fully materialize. Gavin Plum was sentenced to 12 years in prison, with a minimum term of 8 years. He is currently held at HM Prison Belmarsh, a high-security facility, where his dangerous fixations are now contained. Our journey continues through the dark corridors of human malevolence, bringing us face to face with an act that defies comprehension, a father's ultimate betrayal of his own flesh and blood. Chad Christopher Dorman. In June 2023, the state of Ohio witnessed a crime so horrific it sent shivers down the spine of an entire nation. Chad Christopher Dorman, the very man who should have been their protector, instead executed his 3 young sons. The scene was unspeakably brutal. Dorman shot each one of them, even chasing one down and forcibly ripping another from his terrified wife's arms before ending his life. This was no impulsive act. In his chilling confession, Dorman admitted he had planned this unspeakable act for 3 months. The sheer premeditation, the cold calculation, painted a picture of a man devoid of parental love and consumed by a sinister intent. He faces 21 felony counts, and prosecutors in Ohio are actively seeking the death penalty for this monstrous crime. Chad Christopher Dorman currently awaits trial, his fate hanging in the balance, a chilling symbol of depravity. From the ultimate family betrayal, we shift to a brazen act of violence committed against the very system designed to contain such individuals. Curtis Michael Algier. In 2007, a corrections officer in Utah met a tragic end at the hands of a dangerous white supremacist named Curtis Michael Algier. While being transported for medical care, Algier, a man known for his extremist ideology, managed to seize the officer's gun. What followed was a desperate and violent escape. He fled the scene, turning his weapon on a civilian in his desperate bid for freedom. But his rampage was short-lived. Algier was ultimately cornered and tackled in an Arby's restaurant. His short-lived escape brought to an abrupt and undignified end. Facing overwhelming evidence and the very real possibility of the death penalty, Algier accepted a plea deal. He was sentenced to life without parole. Since 2012, Curtis Michael Algier has been incarcerated in Utah, his violent and hateful ideology now caged, a constant reminder of the risks faced by those who work to maintain order. Now, we turn to a crime fueled by a very different, yet equally devastating, form of hatred and paranoia. Joseph Tuba. In 2023, an apartment building in Illinois became the site of a hate-fueled double attack, leaving a community reeling. Joseph Tuba, driven by anti-Muslim paranoia that had been triggered by the escalating Israel-Hamas conflict, brutally stabbed a Muslim tenant and murdered her 6-year-old son. This act of unspeakable cruelty shocked the conscience, revealing the dangerous extremes to which prejudice can lead. The unprovoked violence, directed at an innocent child and his mother, was a clear demonstration of hatred's corrosive power. Joseph Tuba was swiftly brought to justice. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Since 2024, Tuba has been incarcerated, his hate-filled actions leading to an irreversible loss of freedom and the indelible mark of a hate crime on his record. Our journey continues into the chilling depths of the criminal mind, where the most sacred bonds are shattered and unimaginable acts unfold. We now look at a case that highlights a father's unimaginable cruelty. Timothy Ray Jones Jr. In 2014, a heartbreaking and truly disturbing crime unfolded in South Carolina. Timothy Ray Jones Jr. murdered all 5 of his own children. The catalyst for this horrific act was seemingly trivial. He believed his 6-year-old son had broken an electrical outlet. What began as a punishment escalated into a horrifying spree of violence that ended the lives of all his young children. During his trial, Jones Jr. pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, a desperate attempt to explain the inexplicable. However, the evidence of his deliberate actions and the sheer scale of the tragedy led to a different outcome. Timothy Ray Jones Jr. was sentenced to the death penalty. He is currently on death row at Kirkland Correctional, a stark testament to the ultimate price paid for such a profound and calculated act of familial annihilation. From a father's monstrous act, we turn to a shocking display of matricide orchestrated by a teenager, Mohammed Alantawi. At just 16 years old, in Michigan, Mohammed Alantawi committed an act of unimaginable horror. He murdered his own mother. In a cold and calculated attempt to conceal his crime, he then threw her body out a window, hoping to stage it as a tragic accident. His motive, as revealed later, stemmed from anger over his parents' divorce and a rebellious defiance against cultural expectations. But the truth, in its brutal reality, could not be so easily disguised. Surveillance footage and a meticulous autopsy, which conclusively showed suffocation as the cause of death, exposed his heinous deception. Mohammed Alantawi was sentenced to 20 to 40 years in prison. He is currently serving his time in Michigan, with the possibility of parole in 2037, a future forever shadowed by the life he so violently took. And now, a case that embodies a chaotic breakdown, culminating in a spree of violence against both strangers and family. Adrian Oswaldo Sura Reyes. In 2022, Pennsylvania witnessed a terrifying and bewildering series of events unleashed by Adrian Oswaldo Sura Reyes. His rampage began with a senseless act. He deliberately ran over a crowd gathered at a fundraiser for fire victims, turning an act of community support into a scene of carnage. But the horror didn't end there. In a final, devastating act, he then returned home and brutally beat his own mother to death with a hammer. The motive appeared to be a catastrophic emotional breakdown intertwined with long-standing family disputes, culminating in an explosion of uncontrolled rage. The courts responded with the full force of the law. Adrian Oswaldo Sura Reyes received 2 life sentences, in addition to an astonishing 123 to 300 years. He is currently incarcerated in SCI Phoenix, Pennsylvania. His actions a chilling reminder of how mental distress and unresolved conflicts can erupt into unspeakable violence. Our exploration into the darkest corners of human behavior continues, leading us now to a case where mental illness tragically intersected with domestic violence. Joshua Ambergi. In 2022, in Ohio, a domestic dispute escalated into a fatal confrontation when Joshua Ambergi fatally stabbed his mother. This tragic event highlighted the complex and often devastating interplay between mental illness and violent crime. What was particularly disturbing about Ambergi's behavior following the murder was his apparent lack of remorse. He reportedly stated that the case was blown out of proportion, a chilling indicator of a mind perhaps unable to fully grasp the gravity of his actions. Joshua Ambergi was sentenced to 41 years to life. However, his legal journey is not yet concluded. His conviction was later vacated, and he is currently awaiting a retrial, leaving the final chapter of this deeply troubling story yet to be written. From a son's fatal attack on his mother, we move to a horrific crime fueled by a spurned lover's rage. Isaac Nathaniel Christenberry. In 2024, North Carolina bore witness to a devastating crime that tore apart a family. Isaac Nathaniel Christenberry, unable to accept the end of a relationship, brutally killed his ex-girlfriend and her parents. In a chilling moment of perverse restraint, he spared her 10-year-old son, but only after pointing a gun directly at the child. This was a crime born of breakup, a common catalyst for conflict, but one that in Christenberry's case escalated to an unthinkable level of violence. The consequences were swift and severe. Isaac Nathaniel Christenberry was handed 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. He is now incarcerated, his freedom permanently forfeited for the lives he so cruelly extinguished, a stark warning of the dangers of possessive rage. Next, we confront a serial killer whose hunting ground was an online dating app, a place meant for connection, not predation. Caleb Scott Anderson. In 2022, the online dating world became a hunting ground for Caleb Scott Anderson. He murdered 2 men he had met through the Grindr app, a chilling revelation that exposed the dark underbelly of digital connections. What made Anderson's case even more disturbing was his own admission. He confessed to harboring homicidal urges since the age of 14, suggesting a deeply rooted and long-standing darkness within him. The evidence against him was undeniable, including gruesome photos, videos, and disturbing messages that painted a clear picture of his depravity. Caleb Scott Anderson was sentenced to life without parole in Alabama, with additional charges still pending in Wisconsin, indicating the broader scope of his potential crimes. He is currently held at Holman Correctional Facility, his heinous acts now confined, but forever a warning about the hidden dangers that can lurk online. Our final dive into the chilling realities of prison's most dangerous inhabitants brings us to a serial killer whose calculated deception preyed upon vulnerable individuals. Caleb Scott Anderson. In 2022, the online dating world, a place designed for connection, tragically became a hunting ground for Caleb Scott Anderson. He brutally murdered 2 men he had met through the Grindr app. This chilling revelation exposed the dark underbelly of digital connections and the dangers that can lurk when trust is misplaced. What made Anderson's case even more disturbing was his own chilling admission. He confessed to harboring homicidal urges since the age of 14, suggesting a deeply rooted and long-standing darkness within him. The evidence against him was undeniable, including gruesome photos, videos, and disturbing messages found on his devices that painted a clear picture of his depravity and premeditation. Caleb Scott Anderson was sentenced to life without parole in Alabama. The reach of his alleged crimes extends further, with additional charges still pending against him in Wisconsin, indicating the broader scope of his potential victims and the extent of his violence. He is currently held at Holman Correctional Facility, his heinous acts now confined, but forever a stark warning about the hidden dangers that can lurk online, even in spaces meant for forging human connections. From one online predator, we move to another, whose insidious method involved drugging his victims and planting fake suicide notes to cover his tracks. Stephen Port. In the UK, the name Stephen Port became synonymous with a particularly insidious form of serial murder. Port, a predator who, like Anderson, used the Grindr app to target his victims, would drug and assault young men, exploiting their trust and vulnerability. 4 of his victims tragically died as a direct result of his heinous actions. What made his crimes even more sinister was his elaborate attempts at deception. He meticulously planted fake suicide notes with his victims, hoping to make their deaths appear self-inflicted and thereby escape justice. But his carefully constructed web of lies eventually unraveled. Investigators painstakingly pieced together the evidence, linking the seemingly unrelated deaths back to Port. He was ultimately apprehended and brought to justice, receiving a whole life order, a rare and severe sentence in the UK, which means he will never be eligible for parole. He is now permanently incarcerated in HM Prison Belmarsh, a high-security facility where some of the UK's most dangerous criminals are held, ensuring he will never again walk free to inflict his particular brand of terror on society. Next, we shift our focus from calculated online predation to a crime born from a web of deceit and shattered marital trust. Mark Douglas hacking. In 2004, Utah was gripped by a tragic story of a disappearance that quickly unraveled into a murder investigation. Mark Douglas hacking, a man who had built an elaborate facade of academic achievement, brutally killed his pregnant wife, Lori, after she discovered he had been living a carefully constructed lie about attending medical school. The truth about his deceit, once exposed, triggered a violent and desperate act. In a frantic attempt to cover his tracks and conceal his crime, Hacking staged her disappearance, fabricating a story about her going for a run and never returning. He then callously disposed of her body in a dumpster, hoping to erase all evidence of his monstrous act. The initial widespread hopes for Lori's safe return turned to grim reality as investigators meticulously uncovered the truth behind Mark's deception. Mark Douglas Hacking was ultimately apprehended and confessed to the murder. He was sentenced to 6 years to life under Utah law, a sentencing structure that made him eligible for parole after a minimum period. He has now served 20 years, a testament to the long shadow cast by his deceit and violence, forever bound by the consequences of his profound betrayal. His case remains a chilling reminder of how personal lies can escalate into irreversible tragedy. Our next case explores the devastating consequences of domestic violence escalating to unthinkable extremes, leaving multiple lives irrevocably damaged. Kandawasaka Kahari. The tragic reality of domestic violence reached a horrifying peak in the case of Kandawasaka Kahari. In a fit of rage following an argument, he brutally murdered his girlfriend, leaving her body in the trunk of a car, a desperate and chilling attempt to conceal his crime. But the horror didn't end there. In a truly depraved act that defies comprehension, he also assaulted her young child and then abandoned the vulnerable boy, leaving him alone and uncared for over a period of 3 weeks. This prolonged neglect of an innocent child, combined with the murder of his mother, spoke volumes about Kahari's complete breakdown of human empathy and responsibility. This horrific act of domestic violence and child endangerment sent shockwaves through the community, highlighting the hidden dangers faced by victims of abuse. Kandawasaka Kahari was apprehended and subsequently sentenced to 39 years to life in prison. He is now incarcerated with the possibility of parole only in his late 60s, ensuring that the vast majority of his life will be spent behind bars, paying the severe price for the immense devastation he wrought upon a family and an innocent child. Finally, we close our unsettling journey with the chilling story of a teenage boy's unimaginable plan to eradicate his entire family, a stark illustration of the darkness that can emerge from unexpected places. Colin Jeffrey C.J. Haney. At just 16 years old, in 2020, Colin Jeffrey C.J. Haney carried out an unthinkable act of parricide and siblicide, murdering 4 of his family members, including his siblings and his mother. What makes this case particularly chilling is the revelation that Haney had meticulously planned to kill everyone in his household. His sinister plot extended to burning down the house afterward, a desperate and cold-blooded attempt to erase all traces of his horrific crime and conceal the devastation he intended to cause. His dark scheme, however, was only thwarted by a desperate struggle and an incredible act of survival. His father, remarkably, endured the brutal attack and managed to tackle him, preventing further carnage and bringing his terrifying rampage to an abrupt end. The intervention of his father saved lives and allowed justice to be served. Colin Jeffrey C.J. Haney was subsequently apprehended, tried, and sentenced to life without parole. He is currently incarcerated, a young man whose monstrous intentions led him down an irreversible path, forever confined within the walls of a prison. A stark reminder that even within the sanctity of a home, and from the most unexpected individuals, unspeakable evil can lurk and emerge. These are just some of the faces behind the bars, individuals whose actions have left indelible scars on families and communities. Their stories, grim as they are, serve as a somber reminder of the constant vigilance required to uphold justice and protect the innocent.